Welcome to Lesson 4.6 of the Grant Architect course, where we move beyond learning outcomes to explore the deeper changes that represent your program's ultimate impact and lasting value. In this lesson, we focus on intermediate and long-term outcomes, the changes in behavior and life conditions that demonstrate your program creates meaningful and lasting differences in participants' lives. While short-term outcomes measure what participants learned during your program, intermediate and long-term outcomes measure what people actually do differently in their daily lives and how their circumstances and quality of life improve over time as a result. These deeper outcomes are what funders ultimately care about because they represent the return on their investment in your program. By the end of this lesson, you will understand how to articulate behavior changes that follow from learning, condition changes that result from sustained behavior change, and the logical progression from immediate learning outcomes to ultimate community or population level impact. Outcomes progress through distinct levels that build upon each other in a logical sequence from immediate to ultimate change. Short-term outcomes represent changes in learning using the AKASO framework of awareness, knowledge, attitudes, skills, and opinions that we explored in the previous lesson. These are near-term changes occurring during or immediately after participation when participants are still actively engaged with your services. Intermediate outcomes represent changes in behavior and action that follow from learning. Participants do something differently in their daily lives as a result of what they learned in your program. These behavioral changes typically emerge over weeks or months after program participation ends, as participants apply their new knowledge and skills in real-world situations. Long-term outcomes represent changes in condition and status that follow from sustained behavior change over time. Life circumstances measurably improve as a result of participants maintaining changed behaviors consistently. These condition changes may take months or years to fully manifest and become stable. Ultimate impact represents broad community or systems change at the population level. Many programs working on the same issues collectively contribute to population-level improvement over extended time frames. Individual programs usually cannot claim sole credit for ultimate impact, but they can demonstrate their contribution to this broader change. Intermediate outcomes focus on behavior change as the critical link between learning and lasting improvement in participants' lives. The definition is observable changes in what participants actually do differently in their daily lives as a result of what they learned in your program. After learning new information, developing new skills, or shifting attitudes, participants apply that learning in real situations outside the program context. Behavior change is the essential bridge between learning outcomes and improved life conditions. Without behavior change, learning remains theoretical rather than practical. Examples of intermediate outcomes include applying new skills learned in training to actual work situations, changing health habits like diet, exercise, or medication adherence, taking action on goals such as applying for jobs, enrolling in school, or seeking services, and adopting new practices at home or work that reflect what was learned. The time frame is typically weeks to months after program participation ends. Behavior change takes time to establish as new patterns and often requires multiple attempts before becoming consistent habits. Immediate post-program measures may not capture behavior change because participants have not yet had opportunity to apply their learning. Follow-up assessment at appropriate intervals is essential for documenting behavior change. The dependency on short-term outcomes is important to understand. Behavior change typically requires prior learning as a foundation. You apply skills you have acquired through practice, act on knowledge you have gained through instruction, and pursue goals you have adopted through attitude change. The outcome progression from learning to behavior is sequential and logical. Behavior change takes several distinct forms that programs should understand and target appropriately. Starting behaviors involve beginning to do something new that participants were not doing before. Exercising regularly, attending medical appointments consistently, using new parenting techniques, or practicing stress management skills are examples of starting behaviors. Something that was not happening in the participant's life begins to happen as a result of program participation. These behaviors often feel unfamiliar and require conscious effort to establish. Stopping behaviors involve ceasing harmful or ineffective actions that participants were previously doing. Quitting smoking, stopping substance use, discontinuing unsafe practices, or ending harmful relationship patterns are examples of stopping behaviors. Something that was happening in the participant's life stops happening as a result of what they learned. Stopping established behaviors is often more difficult than starting new ones because it requires breaking existing patterns. Modifying behaviors involve adjusting how something is already being done rather than starting or stopping entirely. Eating healthier foods rather than stopping eating, driving more safely rather than stopping driving, communicating differently rather than stopping communication, or managing money more carefully are modifications to existing patterns. Sustaining behaviors involve maintaining changed behavior consistently over extended time periods. Initial change is easier than sustained change because motivation tends to be highest right after program participation. Many behavior changes do not persist beyond the first few weeks or months without ongoing support or reinforcement. Programs that achieve sustained behavior change are particularly valuable because lasting change produces lasting benefits. Measuring behavior change uses several approaches with different strengths and limitations that evaluators should understand. Self-report involves participant surveys or interviews about their behavior. This approach is common and relatively inexpensive to implement, but is subject to social desirability bias. People may report what they think they should do or what they believe the program wants to hear, rather than what they actually do in practice. Self-report is most useful for behaviors that are not socially sensitive. Observation involves directly watching behavior occur in natural or structured settings. This approach is more accurate than self-report for capturing what actually happens, but is expensive and often impractical to implement at scale. Some behaviors cannot be ethically or feasibly observed, particularly private behaviors. Records include administrative or program data documenting behavior through existing systems. Employment records showing job retention, healthcare utilization data showing appointment attendance, school attendance records, and similar documentation provide objective evidence of behavior without relying on participant self-report. These data sources exist independently of your program, but may require data sharing agreements to access. Proxy measures are indicators that suggest behavior even when not directly measured. Purchasing healthy food suggests dietary change is occurring. Gym membership and attendance suggests exercise behavior. Prescription refills suggest medication adherence. Proxies are imperfect substitutes for direct measurement, but sometimes practical when other approaches are not feasible. Long-term outcomes focus on condition change. The definition is changes in life circumstances or status. These represent the ultimate improvements in participant lives that justify program investment. Conditions improve when behaviors change and those changes persist. Examples include employment status improving from unemployed to employed, health status improving from uncontrolled diabetes to managed condition, housing stability improving from homeless to stably housed, and income level increasing above poverty threshold. The time frame is typically months to years after program participation. Condition changes take time to materialize. A job training program graduate may not find employment for months. Health conditions may take years to improve measurably. The dependency on behavior change is typical. Conditions usually improve when people do things differently over sustained periods. Condition change without behavior change is unusual. The causal chain runs through behavior. Condition changes fall into several categories. Economic condition changes include employment status, income level, asset accumulation, and financial stability. Programs addressing economic self-sufficiency target these outcomes. Health condition changes include physical health status, mental health conditions, and wellness indicators. Healthcare programs, health promotion initiatives, and behavioral health services target these outcomes. Social condition changes include relationship quality, support system strength, and community connection. Programs addressing social isolation, family functioning, or community integration target these outcomes. Educational condition changes include academic achievement, credential attainment, and literacy levels. Educational programs, workforce development, and youth services often target these outcomes. Measuring condition change requires appropriate approaches. Standard indicators are common measures used across programs. Unemployment rate, poverty level, high school graduation rate, and similar indicators allow comparison across programs and populations. Administrative data from systems provides objective condition documentation. Employment records, health system data, school records, and similar sources document conditions without relying on self-report. Validated assessments use established measurement tools with known reliability. Health status measures, economic self-sufficiency scales, and quality of life instruments provide standardized measurement. Follow-up is required at appropriate intervals. Condition change cannot be measured immediately after program participation. Follow-up at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or longer may be necessary to observe condition changes. Attribution becomes increasingly challenging for intermediate and long-term outcomes. Multiple factors influence conditions beyond your program. Employment depends on the job market, individual characteristics, and many services received. Health depends on genetics, environment, healthcare access, and behavior. Time lag between program participation and outcome measurement complicates attribution. The longer the lag, the more other factors intervene. 6 months after your program, participants have experienced many other influences. External events affect outcomes regardless of your program. Economic recessions reduce employment regardless of job training quality. Pandemics affect health regardless of wellness programs. The distinction between contribution and attribution is important. You may reasonably claim contribution to outcomes without claiming sole attribution. Your program contributed to improvement along with other factors. Realistic outcome claims meet several criteria. Proportionate claims match outcome ambition to program intensity and duration. A brief intervention cannot claim long-term condition change. Intensive, sustained programs can claim more ambitious outcomes. Evidence-based claims are supported by research showing these outcomes are achievable. If similar programs have demonstrated these outcomes, your claims are credible. If no evidence supports the outcomes, claims are speculative. Measurable outcomes can actually be documented with available resources and methods. If you cannot follow participants long enough or do not have measurement tools, you cannot demonstrate outcomes. Attributable outcomes can reasonably be credited to your program. The causal pathway should be plausible, the timeline should be realistic, alternative explanations should be considered. Presenting the outcome hierarchy in logic models requires thoughtful design. Visual progression should show movement from short-term to intermediate to long-term outcomes. The flow typically moves left to right, or includes separate columns for each outcome level. Causal connections should link each outcome level to the next. Arrows or alignment should show how short-term outcomes lead to intermediate outcomes, which lead to long-term outcomes. The logic should be visible. Time indicators should note when outcomes are expected to occur. Short-term by program end, intermediate at 6 months, long-term at 1 year. This sets realistic expectations and guides evaluation planning. Measurement points should specify when each outcome will be assessed. This connects your logic model to your evaluation plan. Funders want to know when and how you will document achievement. Several mistakes commonly undermine deeper outcome claims. Claiming impact too quickly expects condition change immediately after program participation. Conditions take time to change. Expecting immediate improvement is unrealistic. Skipping steps jumps from outputs to long-term outcomes without intermediate steps. If your logic model shows training sessions leading directly to employment without intervening behavior changes, the logic is incomplete. How does attendance lead to employment? Overattribution claims sole credit for complex outcomes influenced by many factors. No single program eliminates poverty or ends homelessness. Claiming outsized impact for modest interventions damages credibility. Unmeasurable goals identify outcomes you cannot actually assess. If you cannot follow participants or access relevant data, you cannot document outcomes. Unmeasurable outcomes are aspirational but not evaluable. Connecting your outcomes to ultimate impact requires nuanced thinking. Program theory explains how your specific outcomes contribute to broader change. If your program increases employment among participants and employment reduces poverty, then your program contributes to poverty reduction. The logic should be explicit. Collective impact recognizes that multiple programs address the same issues. your program is one of many contributing to community health, economic development, or educational achievement. Ultimate impact results from collective effort. Systems thinking understands contextual factors affecting outcomes. Policy changes, economic conditions, and social factors influence whether individual program outcomes aggregate to population impact. Context matters. Reasonable claims identify what your program can actually demonstrate. Claim the outcomes you can measure and attribute. Acknowledge your contribution to broader impact without claiming more than warranted. Here is a practical exercise to apply what you have learned. Step 1. Identify the short-term learning outcomes from your logic model. These are your starting points for deeper outcomes. Step 2. For each short-term outcome, identify what behavior change might result. If participants gain this knowledge or skill, what might they do differently? Be specific about observable behaviors. Step 3. Identify what condition changes might follow from sustained behavior change. If participants maintain these behavior changes, how might their life circumstances improve? Be realistic about what changes are plausible. Step 4. Assess whether you can realistically measure each level of outcome. Do you have the follow-up capacity, measurement tools, and data access to document these changes? Adjust your logic model to include only measurable outcomes. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson. Intermediate outcomes are changes in behavior following learning. Participants apply what they learned, changing what they do in their daily lives. These changes typically emerge weeks to months after participation. Long-term outcomes are changes in condition following sustained behavior change. Life circumstances improve when people maintain changed behaviors over time. These changes may take months or years to manifest. Attribution challenges increase with deeper outcomes because multiple factors influence behavior and conditions beyond your program. Reasonable contribution claims are more credible than sole attribution claims. In our next lesson, we will explore the theory of change, focusing on the if-then causal hypothesis that explains why your program produces outcomes. Theory of change makes the logic underlying your model explicit.